You thought it was a disease. But in truth, it's toxic overload. When your body crosses the saturation point, your organs begin to collapse, one after another. Not even doctors can save you.
Okay, so we're going deep today. Way deeper than just your typical, health tips and tricks.
Yeah, this isn't just about eating your veggies.
Exactly. We've got this source material that's really making us rethink things. It's suggesting that modern life as we know it might be kind of collapsing from within, and it's not for the reasons you might think.
Right. It's a bit of a paradigm shift. And the core concept here is this idea of the body toxic accumulation saturation point. Now, that might sound a little bit jargony.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is. But stick with us, because once you grasp this concept, it has the potential to completely change how you view pretty much everything.
Like everything.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The air you're breathing right now, the food you eat, the way you age, those aches and pains you start to feel, even how we think about diseases. It all ties back to this idea.
And to really drive this point home, there's just one detail from the article that just stopped me in my tracks. It talks about this noticeable rise in dementia cases, and get this, not just in the elderly, but in teenagers.
Yeah, that's pretty alarming when you think about it. I mean, dementia, something we've always associated with, getting up there in years. But to see it showing up in young people, it really makes you question this whole idea that aging is just a natural, inevitable decline.
Right, like, is it really just about getting older, or is there something else, something bigger at play? And the crazy thing is this article we're looking at, it's not just some, fringe theory. It's presented as a very serious warning, almost like a wake-up call.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to break this down, unpack this whole body toxic accumulation saturation point concept. It's laid out in this article called Why Modern Humans Are a Short-Lived Species. The truth lies in the body's body toxic accumulation saturation point.
It's a pretty bold title, you gotta admit.
It is, but we need to understand why they're making such a strong statement.
And at its core, the argument of the article is actually pretty straightforward. It suggests that a lot of the individual illnesses we experience might not actually be about some specific, bug or malfunction. It's suggesting that it could be our body's way of reacting to being completely overwhelmed by toxins.
It's almost like an emergency response, like the body's saying, hey, something's wrong here, I'm overloaded. So instead of always looking for that one specific cause, the article is saying, hey, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the overall burden of toxic exposure as a primary driver of disease.
So basically, it's not just about that, occasional exposure to something harmful, but the day-to-day relentless buildup of all these things we're exposed to.
Yeah, exactly. And, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, people are living longer these days, right? We're always hearing about increasing life expectancy.
Yeah, that's true.
But this article offers a different perspective. It suggests that while average lifespans might be going up a bit, we're also seeing these really serious diseases popping up much earlier in life.
Yeah.
And maybe we're living longer, but are we living healthier? Or are we spending more of those years dealing with health problems rather than, really thriving?
Yeah, it's like, are we just stretching out the decline instead of extending the prime?
Precisely. And this is where the article gets really real. They call it the brutal truth. And they label modern humans as the inhaling toxic generation.
Okay, the inhaling toxic generation. I mean, that's a powerful image.
It is. And what they're saying is that we are exposed to an unbelievable number of toxins every single day. Somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 airborne toxins daily. Just think about that for a second.
I mean, 2,000 to 3,000, that's mind-boggling.
Right. It's like we're constantly under this invisible siege and our bodies are left to deal with it.
So it's like this very gradual, almost invisible process of just being overwhelmed by these toxins.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this key concept, the body toxic accumulation saturation point.
Yeah.
We've thrown the term around a bit, but let's really unpack what it means.
Yeah, let's break it down.
Okay, so at its heart, it's described as this critical threshold in our physiology. You can almost think of it like a glass of water, okay? Your body, every day, it has a certain capacity to process and get rid of these harmful substances, right?
That makes sense. Our bodies are pretty amazing at filtering stuff out.
They are, but the problem is this article argues that with the sheer volume of toxins we're now exposed to through the air, what we eat, what our skin absorbs. It's like we're constantly pouring more and more water into that glass than our body can possibly empty out.
So it's like we're exceeding our capacity to detoxify on a daily basis.
Exactly. And when that happens, these excess toxins, they don't just disappear. The article explains that they start to accumulate in different parts of the body.
So where do they end up?
Well, the main storage sites they talk about are our fat tissue, our bloodstream, and various organs.
Yeah.
And as this buildup continues, it puts more and more pressure on our entire system.
And this isn't something that happens overnight, right? The article makes it clear that this is a long-term process.
Right. This is not a quick thing. This toxic accumulation can be completely silent for years, maybe 10 years, maybe even 50 years.
Yeah.
And the author believes that this slow and steady buildup over time is the fundamental reason why we develop certain diseases and what ultimately limits our healthy lifespan.
So it's like the hidden determinant of how well and how long we live.
Exactly. It's the factor that's often overlooked.
So we're talking thousands of toxins every day. It just seems so unbelievable. Where are all these toxins coming from? What are we breathing in?
Well, the article pulls data from all sorts of sources, credible organizations like the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and a bunch of other environmental health research. And they paint a pretty disturbing picture. For example, they point out that the air inside the average home or car can contain something like 900 to 1,500 different types of VOCs.
VOCs, what are those again?
VOC stands for volatile organic compounds. They're chemicals that evaporate easily into the air from all kinds of everyday stuff like paints, cleaning supplies, furniture, even some building materials.
So just in our homes and cars, we're talking almost 1,000 to 1,500 different chemicals floating around.
That's right, and it doesn't stop there. The U.S. National Toxicology Program, the NTP, they have a list of over 250 substances found in air pollution that are known or suspected to cause cancer.
250 just from air pollution. That's insane.
Yeah, and on top of the VOCs and the cancer-causing stuff, you've got the actual particles in the air, like PM 2.5 and even tinier, PM 0.1 ultrafine particles.
I've heard of PM 2.5, but what are those ultrafine particles?
So PM 2.5 particles are already incredibly small. I mean, dozens of them can fit across the width of a human hair. But PM 0.1 ultrafine particles are even smaller. And because they're so tiny, they can actually penetrate deep into our lungs and even cross into the bloodstream.
Wow, I had no idea they were that small.
And then you've got things like diesel exhaust residue from burning fuels, microplastics, which are becoming a huge problem, and heavy metals like lead, mercury, cadmium. Even residues from pesticides can become airborne and end up in our lungs.
It's like we're breathing in a toxic soup.
It really is. And then you add in the contributions from industrial processes, all the aldehydes, ketones, and benzene derivatives that get released into the air.
Yeah, the article mentions those too. I mean, it's a lot to take in.
It is. And when you consider all these different sources, the experts, they estimate that the average person today is exposed to at least 2,000 to 3,000 different types of toxins on a daily basis.
That number is just hard to wrap your head around.
I know, and what's even crazier is they're saying this level of constant exposure, it's become the new normal.
So the article actually breaks down some of this U.S. government data into specific categories, right? Can you walk us through those numbers again?
Sure. So just to recap, they mentioned the 900 to 1,500 VOCs we find indoors, then the over 250 known carcinogens in outdoor air pollution, more than 1,000 types of airborne particles from burning fuels and industrial activity. They also mentioned a potential 100 to 300 different chemical additives in a single cosmetic or perfume product, many of which we inhale or absorb through our skin. And then there are the 50 to 100 types of pesticide residues, microplastics, and heavy metals that we ingest through food and water.
So yeah, 2,000 to 3,000 toxins a day. It's a staggering amount.
It really is. And it makes you wonder how our bodies even try to cope with this onslaught.
Right, like what are our defenses against this constant barrage of toxins?
The article outlines three main ways our body responds to toxins. The first line of defense is what they call short-term metabolism.
Okay, so what does that involve?
So this is our body's immediate effort to process and eliminate toxins. Think of things like sweating, breathing. We actually exhale some toxins, believe it or not. And of course, the work done by our liver and kidneys to filter our blood and get rid of waste products.
Right, so those are our main detoxification systems.
Exactly. But what happens when those systems get overwhelmed? When they just can't keep up with the constant influx of toxins?
Yeah, because clearly we're being exposed to way more than our bodies were designed to handle.
That's where the second level kicks in, what they call midterm buffering. So when those immediate detoxification pathways are overloaded, the body starts to store these excess toxins in less critical areas, mainly our fat tissue and connective tissue.
So it's like our body is trying to protect our vital organs by stashing these toxins away somewhere else.
Exactly. It's a temporary solution, but it's not ideal because long-term storage is definitely not a good thing.
So what happens when those storage sites start to fill up?
That's when we get to the third level, long-term damage. And this is where things get really serious. Over time, the continuous presence of these stored toxins starts to cause damage at a cellular level. It's called oxidative stress, and it can harm all these essential components of our cells,
Hmm.
like the membranes, the proteins, the mitochondria, which are like the powerhouses of our cells, and even our DNA.
So it's like a gradual wearing down of our bodies from the inside out.
Precisely. And the article directly links this ongoing cellular damage to the aging process, the development of chronic diseases, and an increased risk of cancer.
And this is where the article connects the dots between this toxic saturation and all those modern diseases we're seeing, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They actually include a table that directly correlates various symptoms and diseases to the ways in which this toxin overload affects the body.
Hmm.
For example, they suggest that things like age spots and changes in skin pigmentation could actually be signs of the body trying to get rid of toxins through the skin when other elimination routes are backed up.
I would have never thought of that.
Right. It's not intuitive. But they're saying our skin is like a backup detoxification pathway.
Hmm.
And then they link respiratory issues like asthma, allergies, and rhinitis to the constant irritation and overstimulation of our respiratory system by all those airborne toxins we're constantly breathing in.
So it's not just about being allergic to pollen. It's about our respiratory system being on high alert all the time.
Exactly. And conditions like insomnia, anxiety, fatigue,
Hmm.
they attribute those to VOCs disrupting the balance of neurotransmitters in our brains and potentially reducing oxygen flow to the brain.
So all those things we struggle with on a daily basis could be linked back to the air we're breathing.
That's what they're suggesting.
Yeah.
And it gets even more serious when you look at things like hypertension and diabetes. They link those to toxins messing with our metabolism and interfering with insulin signaling.
So even metabolic disorders could be tied to this toxic overload.
Right, and of course the chronic cellular damage we talked about that can lead to mutations in our DNA and a weakened immune system, which opens the door to cancer and autoimmune diseases.
It's a pretty scary picture when you lay it all out like that.
It is. It really makes you rethink things.
But here's a question. If we're all breathing the same air and exposed to all these toxins, why do people get different illnesses? Why doesn't everyone just get the same thing?
That's a really good question. And the article addresses that by talking about genetic weaknesses. We all have different strengths and vulnerabilities in our bodies, right?
Right, some people are prone to certain conditions while others aren't.
Exactly. And the core principle they highlight is the weakest organ fails first. So while the underlying problem might be this general state of toxic overload, the specific way it manifests as an illness will vary depending on our individual weak points.
So it's like the weakest link in the chain is the one that breaks first.
That's a great way to put it. So for example, if someone has a family history of lung problems, they might be more susceptible to asthma or allergies from air pollution, while someone else with a predisposition to neurological issues might experience more anxiety or sleep problems.
So it's like the toxins exploit our pre-existing vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And the article gives a few specific examples. They talk about how if your lungs are your weakest link, this toxic overload might show up as a persistent cough, asthma, frequent allergic reactions. But if your brain is more vulnerable, you might experience anxiety, insomnia, or even seizures in more severe cases.
And for some people, it might be their skin that's most affected, right?
Right. They might develop eczema, rashes, allergies, all because their skin is struggling to cope with the toxin overload. And for others, it might be their immune system that takes the biggest hit, leading to cancer or autoimmune disorders.
So it's not just about bad luck or random chance. It's about where our individual weaknesses lie.
Exactly. And this whole idea ties in really well with the article's stance on aging and lifespan. They make a pretty bold statement. They say, modern humans are a short-lived species, not because of fate, but because of toxic overload.
That's a pretty powerful statement. They're really challenging this idea that declining health and shorter lifespans are just an inevitable part of getting older.
Yes, they are. And they put a lot of emphasis on the environment we're born into. They say we are born into a world filled with poisonous air. And their argument is that even if you're doing everything right, eating healthy, exercising, managing stress, you're still constantly exposed to this barrage of airborne toxins just by breathing.
So no matter how healthy you are, you can't escape this underlying toxic burden.
That's their point, and it's pretty unsettling.
It is. So does the article offer any hope or solutions to this problem? Because it's starting to sound pretty bleak.
They do, actually. They propose that the most effective solution is what they call detox at the source. And they specifically emphasize starting with the air we breathe. That's where they introduced this invention by Fuchi Wu, the Air 6-Free Maze Purifier.
Okay, so they go from describing the problem to presenting a specific solution. What is this air purifier and what's so special about it?
Well, they describe it as a unique air purification system that's designed to achieve almost complete air purification. They claim nearly 100%. And they say it can filter out incredibly tiny particles, everything from PM 0.1 up to PM 2.5. It can also block VOCs, acidic and alkaline gases, and other chemical emissions. And they highlight that it achieves this with a relatively simple physical structure.
So it's not just your average air filter.
No, it's not. And the author seems to see this as more than just a piece of medical equipment. They call it a form of lifespan insurance.
Lifespan insurance. That's interesting.
Right? It's presented as a proactive step you can take to significantly reduce the toxic load on your body and potentially extend your healthy lifespan.
So the article actually has an appendix that goes into detail about how this Air 6-free maze purification technology works. What does Air 6-free even mean?
So according to the appendix, Air 6-free means air that is dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and heavy metal-free. So they're aiming for a very comprehensive level of purification, and then they break down the purification process into 5 steps.
5 steps. That's a lot. Let's go through them. What's the first step?
Okay, so the first step is a combination of HEPA and activated carbon prefiltration. HEPA filters are very effective at trapping those larger particles, like PM 2.5 dust, pollen, microplastics. And then the activated carbon absorbs VOCs, odors, and some industrial gases.
So pretty standard first line of defense like you see in a lot of air purifiers.
Right. But then it gets more interesting. Step 2 introduces negative ion charging and pathogen neutralization. So in a controlled part of the purifier, they give viruses, bacteria, and other tiny particles a negative electrical charge. And this process is designed to neutralize those harmful microorganisms without releasing free ions into the air, which is a big improvement over some older ionizer technologies.
So they're zapping those pathogens right out of the air.
Exactly. And then in step 3, they use electrostatic capture. So those negatively charged particles are attracted to positively charged electrostatic plates inside the purifier. And these plates trap those ultrafine pollutants, bacteria, and viruses, permanently preventing them from being released back into the air.
So it's like a multi-layered defense system.
It is. And then we get to the really unique part, step 4, the maze effect.
The maze effect. Now that sounds intriguing.
It is. So this is where they force the air to travel through this structure with multiple angles and curves like a maze. And the idea is that these tiny nanoparticles, they can't easily follow those sharp turns because of their size and inertia. So they end up colliding with the walls of the maze, which are also positively charged, and trap those negatively charged particles.
So it's like a maze for toxins.
Exactly. Every turn is a trap. And the article emphasizes this by saying, every curve in the maze is a trap. Nothing escapes.
Okay, so we've got mechanical filtration, ionization, electrostatic attraction, and now this maze effect. What's the final step?
The final step is simply the release of the ultra-clean air. They claim that after passing through these 4 stages, the air that comes out of the purifier is so clean that it can actually improve brain function, reduce fatigue, and contribute to better organ health.
Wow, so they're saying this isn't just about removing bad stuff, it's about actively improving the air we breathe.
Yes, and they even go so far as to say that this technology should be considered a form of biological protection engineering. They also mentioned that this Air 6-free maze purifier was developed and patented by Fuchi Wu. They even provide the patent number.
Okay, so this article paints a pretty stark view of our modern environment as this constant source of toxic exposure, and then they present this very specific air purification technology as a key solution. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say are the most important takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the core message here is that our lifespan and our health are not solely determined by aging or even genetics. The article argues that this daily exposure to countless invisible toxins plays a much bigger role than we realize.
It's like a hidden threat that we're only just starting to understand.
Exactly. And the article doesn't shy away from this. They conclude with this rather shocking thought. They say that after potentially decades of breathing in what they call poisonous air, we might not simply be getting old. We might be saturated with toxins. And that this underlying toxic burden is a major contributor to many of the health challenges we face today.
So it's not just about wrinkles and gray hair, it's about what's happening at a cellular level.
Right. And they're saying that this toxic buildup could be the root cause of so many modern diseases.
So as you're listening to this, take a moment to think about this idea of toxic saturation in your own life. What actions, if any, resonate with you based on this information? This deep dive really challenges us to think beyond just diet and exercise and consider the impact of our environment, especially the air we breathe. It's not just about individual choices. It's about understanding the world around us and how it might be affecting us at a very fundamental level.
Perhaps taking action to protect ourselves from those invisible threats.
Exactly. We need to start thinking about our health in a whole new way.
Absolutely. It's time to take control of our environment and our well-being.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And be sure to check out the show notes for more information on the article and the Air 6 Free Maze Purifier.
And until next time, stay curious and stay healthy.
Teacher!
The real threat isn't illness, it's silent toxin accumulation. If you want to live long, there's only one way. Remove the toxins before they strike. This isn't medicine. For those who wish to live longer and stay well, reducing toxic exposure may be the most important first step.
Appendix: How the Air 6 Free Maze Purification Works. The revolutionary maze air purification process. Air 6 Free means dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and heavy metal-free. Most people only read one article. So here's a clear, simplified explanation of our core technology, added to every insight so no one misses it. Step 1. HEPA plus activated carbon prefiltration. Removes PM 2.5, dust, pollen, and microplastics. Activated carbon absorbs VOCs, odors, and industrial gases. Step 2. Negative ion charging plus pathogen neutralization. Controlled chamber charges viruses, bacteria, and nanoparticles. Neutralizes pathogens without releasing free ions into the air. Step 3. Electrostatic capture. Charged particles are drawn to electrostatic plates and trapped permanently. Prevents re-release of ultrafine pollutants, bacteria, and viruses. Step 4. The maze effect, forced labyrinth filtration. Air is forced through a multi-angled maze. Nanoparticles can't follow curves, they break from the airflow and slam into positively charged walls. This electrostatic impaction effect ensures even the tiniest toxins are absorbed. Every curve in the maze is a trap. Nothing escapes. Step 5. Final purification. Only ultra-purified air exits the system. Boosts brain function, reduces fatigue, enhances organ health. This is not traditional filtration. This is biological protection engineering. Technology name: Air 6 Free Maze Purifier, developed and patented by Fu-Chi Wu under U.S. Patent No. US 8268058B2.